Hi, this is Jim's Little Boat. I'm Jim. If you watched the first part of this video, you know that I'm right in the middle of fixing the scuppers on my C22 bootstrap, and in the last video I finally decided which method I wanted to use. And I'm about halfway through with this job. I've been working mostly, as it turns out, on getting the bilge area cleaned up and painted and all faired out. So that's taken a great deal of time, but I'm almost ready to drill the hole. So with your permission, we'll skip back 2 weeks and I'll kind of catch you up step by step on what we've done. And if the video is a little long and a little boring, I apologize, but if you're going to do this job yourself, you may want all that information that goes with how I fixed it and the problems I ran into and what I did. So thanks for watching, and here's how I did it. This is the year we're going to change out that nasty gate valve on the scuppers. Get rid of that valve that used to connect to the sink. I don't have any use for that at all. And I fully expect that when I put a wrench on that valve, the pipe is going to come loose and I'll have a much bigger job than I want. But I've been lucky so far. It's time to get that changed out. Well, this is discouraging but not unexpected. This is the gate valve for the cockpit scuppers. It's probably made of bronze and it hasn't moved in many years, certainly not the last 5 years that I've owned the boat. And down at the bottom here, we have a metal pipe that screws into the volcano that goes into the keel housing, and the pipe came out just fine. But whatever that piece of metal that is fiberglassed into the volcano area is, it has deteriorated on the inside and half the threads are gone, just rotted away. I pulled them out with my finger. So now I'm stuck. I got to find out what that metal piece is, and then I've got to get that one out of there and then fiberglass in a new one. And I'm really glad it's just the beginning of December because this looks like a lot of work. But on the upside, look at all that nasty stuff down there, how dirty it is. I think what I will do is clean that all up and sand it out, and then I'll fill it with fiberglass while I'm doing the work in here and ferret out and make it a nice smooth bottom that's easy to keep clean. Make a little lemonade out of these lemons. Back on target here. Yeah. If we look carefully, we can see that there was a threaded fixture in there. It's probably made of bronze since it lasted 40 years, but it has deteriorated and the threads aren't there. That means the choice I have is stick a pipe back into a hole where there's no mechanical attachment, or I can try to attach it outside, but that is inherently curved surface and I wouldn't get any mechanical fastening there. I would just be relying on the glue inside the hole. So the difference is I would make a hole over here, which is a bit of ways. I would make a hole here. It's only an inch or so lower than the water line. Plug that one up. I don't know. I got to think about this. First thing I think I need to do is clean up this whole area down here in the bilge. That nasty piece of wood is not rotten, but it's very dirty. That was the base for the old battery box. So I've got all this scuzz down here. First thing I'm going to do is take my sander, clean all this up with a vacuum assist, and I'll wear a mask. And then we'll see about laying down some fiberglass and getting this all cleaned up and painted so it's not so nasty. Some days it's hard to be me. The job has now expanded from that part of the boat down to the locker under the settee. I've got it cleaned up. I've cleaned up the cracks as much as I can with a 5-in-1 tool. So I think the next thing to do is vacuum it, wipe it down with acetone, and let's begin to fill up these little low spots that want to collect nasty bilge water. A cup of water seems like a gallon when it's running around in all that stuff over there. Remember, acetone and epoxy are poisons. You're working in a confined space. Protect yourself. I mixed up some epoxy with high density filler and I just let it flow down into that little valley, and it seems like it's stiff enough it didn't run away like water. The excess I just squeegeed over the surface, filled in around there. So I'm going to let that set up overnight and then, or for a couple days. The only source I have in here is a 100-watt light bulb for heat. So we'll see what happens, and then I will sand it out and finish filling it and fairing it up, and we might be ready to go on to the next step in a day or 3. Just a little update while I'm waiting for my stuff to get here from Catalina Direct. I cut a little relief hole in front of each of those scupper tubes that come down from the cockpit. That'll make it a lot easier to get a screwdriver or a wrench on the clamp that will attach the hose. And while I've been waiting, I went ahead and put in two 10 by 10 squares, one on each side of the keel. I had the glass, I had the resin. Thought, what the heck, I had read an article where a guy who did this same job said that the hull was a little thin there. So I know CD will send some reinforcing blocks, and I thought an extra layer couldn't hurt. The inside of the boat's all prepped, and it's time to get serious about exactly how we're going to solve the problem of these scuppers. So I thought I'd kind of just show you the parts and the choices I've made. This is the stuff I originally ordered to go in the boat. This is what Catalina sends you: a T-fitting to go there, and a plastic Marlin gate valve. Pretty good piece of equipment, better than metal. And that would give you exactly what you had before, but that doesn't solve the pipe problem. And because of the T, you can't really clean it out. I had an idea to put in a Y instead of the T. That would make it easier to clean out. But that really wasn't going to work because there wasn't enough vertical room to install that. So the new plan is to install 2 of these valves, one on each side, and go directly through the hull. And last night, I received a package from Catalina Direct. So just for fun, let's open it together. Let's see what we've got here. I don't exactly remember what's going to be in the package. They sent a fiberglass repair kit, and I don't know exactly what the purpose of that is, although I've got plenty of fiberglass here. I just buy everything. This is what I was really after, the through hulls. So we're going to obviously drill a hole in the bottom and install 2 of those. And some 4,000 marine adhesive. I'm surprised. I thought they'd send 5,000 or 5,200. And the other valve I asked for. Second through hull. Won't need that. Two blocks of wood with a hole in them. Now, as I understand it, these will be fiberglassed into the bottom, and then the through hulls will be installed through those. That's to reinforce it. I already put some extra glass on the bottom of the hull. And what else we've got? We've got some instructions. So, I think we're good. I'm going to sit down and read the instructions. I just read the instructions. They're okay. They're not all that swell. But it turns out the first thing that you need to do is take these 2 blocks of wood and impregnate them on every surface with resin. So I happen to have a lot of that, but if you don't, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and buy Catalina's kit, because they've got the glass, they've got the resin, and they've got the fiber that makes it sticky like glue. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I won't document these steps, but I'll mix up a bunch of resin and impregnate both blocks, every surface, and I'll probably do it twice. They say to wipe it off with water before you install it, but my experience is sand between each coat. Some oil comes to the surface to make the epoxy set. So that's what we'll do. It occurred to me this morning that I'm going to need a way to tighten up the through hull. It has these little ribs so that you can put a tool in there and hold it while my buddy Tony turns this from the inside of the boat. Remarkably, given all the tools I have, I don't have one, so I've made a piece of plywood that can jam up against it, and I can hold that from the bottom while Tony tightens up the nut. So not an elegant solution, but it'll work. I've been putting this task off for a long time because I don't really know how to do it. I think what I'm going to try to fill this hole that used to hold the scupper tube is to
make a rounded dowel that fits inside the keel trunk space, cover that with wax paper, jam it up in the hole, and then push down resin, matting, and colloidal filler from the top and make a plug. I spent some time this morning cleaning this up with a file and a piece of sandpaper in a dowel. So it should be clean surface inside, but I'd like a nice clean fix. This is the dowel I'm going to use to plug up the hole from the bottom. It's just a closet pole. Wrap the dowel up in some tape to make it a little fatter, and then we're going to roll it up in some wax paper so it doesn't stick to the resin. We'll give that a try. That looks like it'll do it. It's just a piece of lath with some spring in it jammed up so it holds the dowel up against the hole. Looks like that when you get farther away. I put in 2 pumps of resin, probably more than I need, and then I'm going to mix in some fiber filler here, and then I tore apart some matte cloth, and I'm going to put those in so I get some threads. So never tried it. We'll see how it works. I've been saying that a lot lately. Looks like it might work. It would certainly plug up your sink. I gently pushed that big glob down in the hole and worked it with my fingers and a stick and a plug and all sorts of things. Heater's going in the boat. We'll just let it set up and come back tomorrow and see how we did. Well, gosh, the dowel and wax paper seemed to work out pretty well. It's smooth, it won't take much sanding at all, and it's hard as can be. And here's the top side, and it's all hard. It's a little ragged, but a file and some sandpaper, and we'll get that all faired up. And the glue is in place, and I really couldn't figure out how to clamp them, so I just grabbed 2 heavy jars of nails to sit on there. One on the left looks like it wants to slide a little bit. I'll come back and check it in 30 minutes. Well, I've cleaned and filled and coved and faired and painted, and I think it's probably time to just sail her up and cut those 2 holes. I've been putting it off long enough. I did want to share with you how much cleaner it is down here in the bilge. Maybe I'll do a little before and after picture. Getting ready to do the actual deed here. I made a little change to the hole saw. It's a 1 1/8 Milwaukee hole saw. I added 3 washers to the back because I want the bit to stick out only a tiny bit. That way, the hole saw will be supported by the plywood when the bit makes contact. So that's kind of the reason. The next thing I'm going to do is go see if a regular drill will work or will I need a right angle drill. As it turns out, a regular old cordless drill will work. It's tight, but you don't need a right angle drill. Now that I've got the hole started, I want to take these washers out because I want more of the bit to poke out. I want to get more than halfway through the wood, but I want to stop when that little bit comes out this bottom side of the boat. Then I can finish the cut from the bottom up, and I'll get a much cleaner cut if I do it that way. So the hole just started through on the port side, and starboard side's right there. I can't hold the phone and drill at the same time, but I'm going to finish off these holes from the bottom now. The deed is done. All we need to do now is sand off the bottom, paint around it, get it back to the barrier coat, and we will be ready to install. As it turns out, the fiberglass on that part of the hull is just a little bit less than a 1/2 inch thick. Then there's a piece of plywood on top of that, and then a thin skin of fiberglass on top of that. So that boat is almost 5/8, 3/4 of an inch thick at that part of the hull. Took some 80 grit sandpaper and sanded away the ablative around the hole, so I'm not worried about it. I have 7 coats of epoxy barrier coat. And while I was doing that, I took the 80 grit and softened the edges so that protect the gel coat from any cracking. Well, we're stuck in the Gluck. We installed these parts today. This is the through hole fitting I got from Catalina Direct. It didn't fit. It's too short. You can see the 4200. We had it all the way in there. The one on the starboard side almost fit. The one on the port side, no chance at all.
So I got on the phone to Catalina Direct and I measured this and told them, well, that's 2 inches. And they went and said, well, nonsense, that's 3.5 inches. Then they went out and checked their parts bin and said, oh, it is 2 inches. The vendor sent us the wrong part. So they're great guys and I'm sure they'll make it good. But for now, this job's on hold. We're just waiting for Catalina Direct to get us some new parts. Well, there's the part on the left that I got from Catalina Direct. The stem is 2 inches long, and it was just too short. It needed to be 2.5 or 3. They used to sell a 3.5-inch part. Here's the part I got from GPS sales. It's called a Groco or a Graco something. There's the part number, and the threaded stem on that is 5 inches long, which is way too long. I just tried it out in the boat, and I'm going to cut off 2.5 inches, and then we'll go back and test fit them again. And in a second, I'll show you how I cut metal like that in a vise with a hacksaw. So that's 3 inches to the top of the top nut, and I have the 2 nuts locked together so they won't spin on me while I'm trying to do the cut. I'll make the cut on the left side, and by having the 2 nuts there, whatever threads I bugger up, when I back off the nuts, they'll straighten them out. At least that's the theory. Since it's bronze, it seems to be cutting pretty easily. It's not exactly a new hacksaw blade, and it's still going through it pretty quickly. I was trying to clean it up just a little bit with a grinder, and I kind of screwed it up. But if I think I take a file and hold it at a 45-degree angle and add a little taper to the top, we'll be okay. We can see that it does fit. I wanted a 1/2 inch to spare down at the bottom. I probably could install this by myself, but this is a pretty darn important part of the boat. So I want Tony down there holding it while I put it all together. Before I share the next thing with you, I want to talk for a second about pipe compound. This is the stuff you pick up at the hardware store. It goes on metal pipe, and we call it pipe dope. This is not the thing you should use on plastic, simply because it has oil as a vehicle, and that can soften the plastic. Now, instead of that, get something like this. I've got 2 different brands here, and in the tiny, tiny little fine print, it says this is specifically made to use on plastic pipe. Here's another brand. Just a thing, don't use regular pipe dope. Get something made for plastic. Generally, it's not a very good idea to put Teflon tape on plumbing that involves plastic parts. But on this one, I want to put on just a minimal layer so that I can put the pipe dope on top of the Teflon. That way, if I ever need to take this thing apart, it will come. Over time, this pipe dope will harden and you will never get that off. So 1 layer of Teflon, a little bit of pipe dope, and then screw the fitting off. I decided to show you this in the shop because it's warm and comfortable and I can stand up, and this way I'm not laying on my belly down in the build. Tony came over this morning and we installed the 2 through hulls. We tightened up the nut finger tight on the inside till we had a bead of 4200 just squeeze out around the fitting. Tomorrow we'll put a wrench on it and tighten it up tighter, and we can finally finish this job. We're getting ready for the final assembly here, and as the last thing to do, I'll need to tighten the valve up on the stem. And I need to do that in such a way that I don't mess up these threads, because I'll of course want to take it apart someday. So I'll screw it on as hand tight as I can get it, and then when the final tightening comes, I'll use the channel locks to hold the bronze, like so. And these are only 1/2 inch wide, and the big issue is put some tape on those jaws so they don't mess up the threads. You'll want to disassemble it someday. For just a second, let's talk about clamps, hose clamps. There are $2 hose clamps, and there are $8 hose clamps. Let's take a look at the difference. $2 hose clamps have a perforated band that digs into the hose, and they have a screw that is not made out of stainless steel. It says all stainless, but it's not. See, the magnet attracts the screw. $8 hose clamps do not have any perforated metal, that actually touches the hose. The band tightens up via these little indents, and the screw that tightens it up is not magnetic. So you got an $8 hose clamp, all stainless steel, band on the inside, stainless steel screw, and you have a $2 hose clamp that gets rusty over time. Well, guess which I'm going to recommend, since your through hulls are about 5 or 6 inches below the water line. I think it's worth an $8 clamp. Now, if you disagree with me, maybe we could split the difference and you could put this one on the bottom and this one up at the top. But in any case, it's my boat, and my boat gets the best I can afford, and that's $8 clamps.
Well, we're all finished. It took a lot longer than I planned on, but we had some parts problems 2 different times, and I decided to spend a huge amount of time cleaning up that bilge. So I think if you had all the parts on hand and you didn't want to obsess about the bilge, you could probably get this project done in probably 5 or 6 days. If, on the other hand, you want to clean up the bilge, I'd allow a week and a half, 2 weeks. But it looks okay. Unfortunately, the only way I can test it is to launch it, so we'll be extra careful and watchful when that day comes in early April.